welcome to our August edition of Ask the Boss, where you get to ask our CEO some important questions about some key issues around the club. So as always, here in the studio at the Zurich Centre is our boss, Justin Pascoe. Welcome, Justin.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
And also with us is our new Head of Recruitment, Scott Fulton. Scotty, welcome to you as well.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Great Appreciate to see you here. Looking well. Both of you looking very dapper, actually.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, plenty for us to chat about over the next half hour or so, including the recent appointment of Benji Marshall to the head coaching role in 2024. We'll talk about where our playing roster is at for next season. We'll talk some key recruitment issues, retention as well. We'll also touch on, well, I guess some of the criticism that has been directed at the club, some directed at you, some directed at you. I haven't been hit just yet, but we'll touch on some of those key issues around the club. Also, the recent trip to New Zealand, a great event, I think, in Hamilton, but still there were some that found some of those issues they were talking about. We'll chat about that as well, Justin. Last but not least, there's now a barbecue owned by Brooksy. Even that has fueled a fair bit of debate. We'll talk about some of these issues. A lot of them are key issues and some serious issues. We might have a little bit of fun along the way if you want to as well. A bit like our podcast Behind the Raw, we have received plenty of questions from the crowd, and that generally is what this forum is about. It's where you get to pose, well, hard-hitting questions, whatever you want, to our boss, and we'll get through as many as we can over the next half hour or so. So, gents, again, welcome to Ask the Boss. A fair bit of ground to cover. You ready to do the hard yards?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Yes, sweet.
Now, Scotty, you were a very talented hooker, I'll give you that, in your day.
I was adequate.
We probably should clear this up too. We butted heads a few times as players back in the day, in the 90s. You were a better player than me, I'll give you that, as both hookers. But you're a very good dummy half, right? So you're going to be, I want good clean service, early ball. You're quite agile. You've got a bit of speed, Justin. All right. So you'll be out there. I reckon centre 3/4 will put you in. Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
All right. Now, before we dive into the questions from the crowd, from our members and fans, and again, thanks for sending them through. A few things from me as well. Scotty, Manly through and through you are, right? And the Fulton name, it's synonymous with the Sea Eagles. Just take us through it. How did you joining West Tigers, how did it all come about? Where did it start?
Look, I'd sort of been at Manly for the best part of 9.5 years, and I could see I just really wanted probably a new challenge. I could have stayed at Manly, but I wanted a new challenge, and sort of a third party sort of put it out there to a few clubs and whatnot that I might be available, and I had a meeting with 3 clubs in the end, and sort of I had a decision to make, and I sort of looked at the roster here, and I looked at the overall structure of the club and where it was on the table and all that, and I seen that as a pretty big challenge that I think that I could help rectify in the future and moving forward and sustain it for a long time. So hence why I went home, spoke to my wife Raylene, and this was sort of the club that I'd settled on, and I was very happy that I did.
No, it's good to have you here. And Justin, so can you elaborate a little bit further about the rationale, I guess, behind bringing Scott to West Tigers?
Yeah, look, I think Scott obviously comes with a heap of experience in the recruitment. He's got some really established and fantastic relationships with key managers out there. He's got obviously a detailed knowledge of all rugby league and all players, not only from a NRL perspective but also pathways perspective. We felt that Scott would be of value to our club. His style around negotiation, I think, is really important for a club like us, and I think we've seen that already with the speed, albeit still strategic in the regards to how we're recruiting, but the speed of execution and how it's been done, I think can only benefit a club like us, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work more with Scott in the oncoming years.
I would like to get into the processes of recruitment, because I guess a lot of our fans are keen to know how it actually works, right? And we'll dive into that in a little bit of time. But I guess, Scotty, when you identify a player or players, there's got to be key conversations had. Well, let's dive into it now, the process around recruitment. You've identified someone, and we'll talk about some of the players we've already recruited. How does that work, that process then? Clearly, there's got to be some high-level discussions with the head coaching staff. Take us through the
definitely
process.
is. I've identified kids, even when I was at Manly, that are just sort of hitting the scene now. But obviously, that the demographics changed, and I'm looking at them now for West Tigers, depending on whether we need those kids, because it's could be different at Manly as it is to, we might have those kids coming through. So I don't want to buy over the top of the kids that we've already got. So, but with the top stuff, I speak to JP and bounce things off him, Danny Stapleton and Benj. And,
so they're part of the recruitment and retention committee, is that?
Yeah, so we've got a list management committee, which is made up of obviously Scott, our chairman of the committee, Danny Stapleton, who represents board's interest, head coach Tim Sheen's currently, and also given that we have a transition period of Benji for next year, obviously he's been involved, myself and also our CFO from a governance and risk perspective around the cap. What predominantly happens, and has happened in all my tenure and before that, and no doubt it happens at all clubs, is that the coaching staff identify the positions and the type of player, and then they charge Scott, in this case, with the task of actually going out and then coming back with options. And those options obviously have to fit into not only the style of player, the position, but also the character of the person, and also the value of that person, how it fits into the salary cap. And then there's, healthy, robust discussion that happens. But in the end, it hasn't changed in all my time in sport, and I don't think it's changed anywhere in the world. In the end, the coach gets the final say. But what that list management committee is put there to do is to create robust discussions, challenge some of those suggestions being put forward, so they've done in the best interest of the club.
And players that you identify might not fit with, let's say, Benji or Tim, the vision they've got, right? So that's not always going to be on the same page.
Yeah, sometimes. So you might suggest like a player early in discussions, and then you present footage and things, and just the variables around it, and then 90% of the time, especially with Des, for argument's sake, he may not want a player that I wanted to start with, but then after they watch him for a while, players sort of grow on people, and we like myself and Benj and JP State, we've sort of been pretty, even with our most recent meeting, it's been pretty good. Like we're pretty well on the same page with all the players that we want to get. There's only slight variables, and I can only see that being the same going forward now. We're very much on the same page.
Just part of Scott's role, and part of the challenge of Scott's role, is actually to sit there and convince a coach on why this player or these players should be considered. And that comes down to Scott coming back into those meetings with a whole raft of detail, including, that not only the way the player plays, the video analysis, the statistics to back that up, but also, description of the character of that person and why Scott believes that this person or these players should be considered. That's the challenge. But, we have, out of all the meetings that happen within this business, the most robust discussions by far always happen at a list management, as they should. Because you've got a finite amount of money, you've got a finite amount of spots, and you've got to get it right. So if you weren't having these robust discussions, it means no one else is really thinking or challenging the outcomes, and that's not in the best interest of the club.
How was it? You're only here a few weeks, and then there's some reported rifts between you and Benji. How did that make you feel when you've just walked into the joint?
Well, I'm not worried about anything like that. I've sort of grown up
You're
with all
all
this
good,
stuff,
right?
so I don't care. I can handle anything. It doesn't really matter. But a lot of it's made up, to sell papers. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. So, and as Justin was pointing out there, so you're not always going to see eye to eye on who we're bringing, but those robust discussions are necessary, right?
Yeah, and I think, look, they are, but it's only sort of, I think people want drama. They live on drama. And the more drama you can sort of create, whether it's true or false, or even if it's minute, but someone can turn it into a big drama, well, it sells papers.
Yeah. Life's good without drama sometimes, isn't it? Let's the fair bit of activity recently in recruitment. Should we talk about some of the fellas that we've already signed? So most recently, in the last few days, Aiden Caesar on a 1-year deal. He's doing a job with Leeds. Yeah, 32.
He was a very competent player when he was over here, and then he went over there. He's been there about 4 years, I believe, now. So he's got something to offer when he comes back, especially when we've got Latu and Bud Sullivan. So he'll be sort of a steadying influence on the two boys, and he'll play his part.
So obviously,
again, just on that though, like you identify, which we had, that there's a gap in the halves. We specifically went and targeted halves. We didn't go outside of that parameter. Again, back to the finite amount of spots and the finite amount of money. You look at what is a priority around making the biggest difference to your roster and the outcome that we're all trying to achieve, which is playing regular finals football. Scott identified Latu and obviously Bud as huge opportunities, and then it was clearly identified that we need, because it's quite a young roster still, that we need some actually really experience, some real hard nose, and so Caesar was identified.
So, and obviously in the halves, we're all fingers crossed that Adam will bounce back strongly next year. When that is, we're not quite sure, right?
So he's ahead of schedule. So without putting a medical hat on, which isn't my expertise at all, but we believe sort of July at the moment, which is, at one stage it was going to be the whole year, but now we're looking at July, which is, it's good for Adam and good for the club.
I spoke to him last week, Adam. He had his first session post-op here. He's in good spirits. So, I mean, we're all...
Yeah, he's a very good player.
Yeah.
And plenty of time for him.
Good human as well. So, just still on the halves then, Bud Sullivan, Jaden Sullivan, 4-year deal for him. An exciting player. He did some damage to us at Magic Round up there at Suncorp.
He's only going to get better. He's played, a bit over 30, in between 30 and 40 games from memory. So, but if you look at the halves, like we've taken that long game approach with Latu and Bud. Obviously Bud played against those good Manly sides we had we played against him in the juniors and grand finals and different things. So I've seen him play for quite a long time, and obviously Latu's, my relationship with the Latu family, Fainu family, I apologise. And if you look at all the halves that are getting about, like Evans and bloke at the Broncos and all the good halves, Walker at South, Reynolds.
There's not many out there though, is there?
They're all old.
There are not many.
When I say old, they're well into their early 30s, 32, 3, 4. So where's the next batch coming from? So they're hard to find. So hence you go for the young boys and you play the long game.
Can I ask you though on that, and we're not getting off track a little bit because it's an important issue, but there is a dearth of first grade standard halves. Would you say that's a fair comment compared to other positions?
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just a generation. I don't know. It's one of those things. Queensland seem to have more than us, generally. But whether it goes back to a junior league thing, I'm not quite sure. But it'll change. Like in 2 or 3 years, there'll be a heap of halves come through, at all the clubs. So it's just one of those.
We've got some young fellas too in our pathways. Just on the Fainu brothers,
it's just important though too, with the recognition that there is probably a shortage of halves in the marketplace. That you look at how the club can contribute to filling that void. And halfway through this year, we started up a spine academy. So that academy is there to develop all those kids in our system and our geographical area to come through and make sure that when they get to sort of that 18, 19, they're actually NRL ready.
We'll talk about some. We had 3 boys represented or selected for the Australian schoolboys. I'll chat about them in a moment too. But just on the Fainu brothers, so that's a 4-year deal. There was some criticism about the length of deal. Latu is...
Well, firstly, there was criticism that we missed out on them when there was rumours that they were going elsewhere. And then there was equal criticism when we landed them.
We love a bit of criticism. There was some raising eyebrows about the length of the deal, but then there are others saying, hey, well done, locking these 2 away.
Well, can I just jump in there? Like, who cares what anyone else thinks?
Yeah.
I couldn't give a rat's. We're doing the best thing for our club, and the outside noise can just go and beat it for all I can see. I really don't care.
Tell us what you really think.
Yeah.
Latu, tell us about him.
He's been very mature kid, plays like...
Is he a 6?
Yeah, he's a 6. Yeah, he's a very mature kid. He plays well sort of above his weight. Like he's very good in defence. He's a very good thinker. He can read a game. Probably as good as any kid I've ever seen. Even going back to like when I was playing years ago with all the stars come through then in the 90s and things. He will only get better, and he plays. Look, he's going to be one of those kids that's going to play like hopefully at this club for 12 years, and he'll
Will he be ready for NRL next year, do you think?
Without a doubt.
Yep.
And with Benji's coach, see that's another thing that was very good with Benji being a halfback, 5'8".
That appealed to him.
Well, it did, but I think that'll bring him on even quicker. And I just feel that with his brother as well, who is just as good but in a different position, I think the club will benefit massively from having those two boys.
So that's Samuela, touch older, back rower, is he?
Yeah, he can play edge. He's an athletic kid. He can play front row, back row, but I think eventually, like later down the track, he'll be a front row outright. But at the moment, he's sort of athletic enough to play both.
They both played in the Origin under-19s recently. We've got a couple of other boys that also played in that, Josh Folletti and Chris Fagutu as well. So there's other young fellas coming through. And I touched on the Australian schoolboys as well. Lachlan Galvin, Heath Mason and Luke Laulili.
Yep.
You've seen a fair bit of these boys?
Yeah, I've seen them throughout the juniors and all that, playing against us over at over at Manly. So yeah, I've seen them for quite a long time, even at Westfields as well, when I used to sort of haunt there a bit. But it's sort of all those boys are very good players in the future. So it's good to have sort of that continuity with the boys sort of coming through at that age group, that sort of, it adds a bit, and they're all mates, like even the Fainus know all the boys from out west, because obviously they're from out west. So it's sort of just on a social basis too, it sort of helps.
Tell us, JP, about the salary cap situation then. I think relative to other, well, I don't know, I think relative to other clubs, we're in pretty good shape, aren't we?
Yeah, well, I can't speak on other clubs, but I can speak on our current situation versus previous years. We're in the healthiest position we've been in. Part of the challenge is, when we talk about recruitment, is actually having the ability to go out and get players that are available. And there's not a lot at the moment that are available. So, albeit we've got a lot of money in the salary cap, not only for next year and the years after, we're still going to sit back and just strategically make sure that we're doing the right thing at the right time and getting the right person for the right value.
I read a report in recent days, again, taking a shot at the club about its management of the salary cap.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that was referring. I think that's referring to the paying out of players that are at other clubs. I think that happens at all clubs.
Yeah,
and I think if you read the article, there was several other clubs mentioned, not just us. It's just that the title was just us, which seems to be the way to sell papers, to Scott's point, is to use West Tigers in the title. But it happens at all clubs. It's a part of strategic management of the cap. We'll always sit there and say that we're not going to get, as a club, every decision right in everything we do, but we try and get the majority of them right. And sometimes to fast track the acceleration of the evolution of the roster, you've got to actually pay some players to play at other clubs, and it happens at all clubs.
You've got to make tough decisions, and that's your job as chief executive, right? And a head coach has got to make tough decisions. When a team's not winning, the head coach, I guess the buck stops with him, right? Every other decision around the club, whether it be made by yourself or by the board, generally the spotlight comes back on you. How does it make you feel, JP, when some of that criticism starts to get personal?
Oh, look, it's not meant to be a flippant answer by any means. But
does it wear you down?
No, because I don't look at it. I think everyone's got their right to have an opinion on decisions the club are making. And, we're in the business of here to win games of football, and we haven't over, a long period of time. And, our fans are frustrated. We're frustrated. People attacking me personally, it literally means nothing to me. The only time I see it is when mates of mine or people like yourself think it's hilarious and come up and inform me about it and send me stuff through. People that I respect, that are qualified, that have been administrators of big businesses or businesses that have an opinion on things we're doing, obviously I take that on board, but people that haven't or aren't qualified to actually make serious judgment on what we're doing from an administrative perspective, look, I don't look at it. I mean, it probably affects kids more than myself, because kids, at school, other kids sort of sit there and make some comments towards them at time, which isn't really fair, but it doesn't affect me at all. Honestly, I don't look at it. I don't look at the TV shows. Your job is to inform me when there's media of concern. I sit there, and as long as this club is in complete alignment collectively, and I say it all the time, and you've probably all heard me say it internally all the time, the strength of any club and any business comes in the unity that we all have. If we're all believing that we're on a path and we're all in alignment on that path, and we stay solid to that, and we have respect to everyone about their capabilities and these robust discussions internally, and we actually keep it all internally, then the outside world really can't affect us. It's when people become sort of pressured by the outside noise and you start looking after oneself that you start getting cracks in that armour. And once you get cracks in the armour, that's when clubs fall apart. So, my role I see is not only to take the bullets, because I am the chief executive, and that's the responsibility that I take seriously, and I take the bullets, and that's the part of the role, right? But I sit there and look at things like, going to Waiheke Island last week, and the article about Waiheke Island, I get people coming up to me and saying it's just comical and almost predictable. It becomes boring.
I was going to mention that.
But I mean,
we're sipping Sav blogs in, what's the island called?
Waiheke. Beautiful place, by the way. But, what's forgotten in stories like that is that there was 3 very key stakeholders that were joining me for lunch. And contributors to the club on many levels. Significant contributors that are important to do those things with. There was another one too. What was the other one?
There was another one, but what point I think you're saying is that if we're all on the same page and unity is really important with the club, and every decision you or the board make is for the benefit of the club.
Look, no one's making a decision with a sole purpose to send the club backwards. No. Everyone here is working really, really hard internally. There's a great amount of staff here that put a lot of hard effort in every single day and on weekends. I think the club, albeit, no one wants to be sitting last at all. We want to be playing finals football. That's what we do every single year, is come in to make sure that our members and fans can be really proud of what we're doing. It's hard to sit there and avoid the criticism because it's a huge club and we haven't been successful on the field. But again, I can sit there and say that we're heading in the right direction, and it's hard to see that possibly, but we are heading in the right direction. And I know internally with the position of the cap, I know with the players we're targeting, and sometimes recruitment, you've seen it with the Broncos, gets you from last 3 years ago to where they are today. And that's what we're aiming to do, to add to their already talented roster that we have. Structurally, we've been able to make some decisions around investment in especially the football and pathways, which you mentioned, the young talent coming through. Like 4 years ago, we didn't have the financial capacity to do that. We're not here to make money. We're here to invest money back into the businesses that will make long-term or short-term and long-term positive effect to this business. But again, it doesn't affect me personally. I don't listen to it. I think it's comical at times. And the only time I ever see it is when people like yourself or mates send it through and think it's hilarious.
Or mates, I'm a mate too, aren't I?
Oh, yes, Chris, you are.
Questions from the crowd, members and fans. We will get to some of them, I promise you, and there's lots that have come in. But, okay, what would you say, JP, to criticism, again, pointed at you? You have presided over the club for about a decade, and they will say, well, we haven't made the finals in that time. The fingers come at you.
Yeah, well, as I said, it's criticism that's fair enough too. We haven't played finals for the 8 years I've been here. I think the club is in a far healthier position than it's ever been before, albeit not playing finals. So if you think about the strategic discussions that we have internally, every decision we make, and you're a part of those discussions in a workshop that we did probably 6 weeks ago. Every decision we make has to be about what positive effect it will be on the football department of being successful. But again, you think about the stability of the club, the financial position in terms of allocating resources, the ability we have to have a facility like this, the ability we have to go back to our 2 suburban grounds and recapture the identity, the ability now to have Benji moving forward as a head coach, and obviously a different football structure and department to support him. There's a lot of good things. The ability to bring someone like Scott Fulton, who doesn't come cheap, on board. But no, with all seriousness, you know, when I first started, we didn't have the resources to go out and target certain people to come into this business and create the capability and capacity that we do today. But I get it. We haven't been successful, and that's what we're here to do. So that's what we're working hard to rectify.
Just back on the trip to New Zealand, if we can go back to that. No, not your trip to the beach and the Sav Blancs on the beach. The actual trip itself. I've been in the game for many, many years, right? And I've got to say, honestly, I don't think I've seen as much goodwill in a community en masse like we saw in New Zealand. They were just so appreciative of what we did as a club. And I think that some of that got lost as well. But
look, I personally think, because I had to do a couple of corporate gigs on the day, the respect in the room for the gesture of us taking a game back and being genuine about it and saying thanks to the New Zealand public, and most importantly to the Warriors for the sacrifices they did or made for over 1,000 days. Because again, I hope it's not lost on people that sport has that enormous ability to transcend so much positive messages to people when they're down. And it was a really tough environment for everyone for that 2.5 years through COVID. And the ability for us to keep us as a collective in terms of the NRL, the community, to keep the game going, it wouldn't have happened without the Warriors, and it should not be lost. And when we were being displaced as a consequence of the recent World Cup, that from our grounds, it was a no-brainer for us to sit there and say, well, where should we take a game, and what is the reason behind taking the game? Because you don't just want to take a game for taking a game's sake. You want to have a purpose behind it. And the crowd, I don't know how it came through on broadcast, but being over there and being a part of it, walking down the street and the people coming up and saying thank you in the hotel, in the corporate suites, still getting emails from people over there, from council and government.
Yes, okay,
it's not a one-up, Chris. You don't have to always be better.
I am as well.
But no, it was a wonderful experience for the players. I know the players appreciated it. We went a day early, which was, I think, a lot of young people, young guys in our squad to go over there and do the cultural things and the welcome and all that. I think was really special for them as well.
Was that to go to Waiheke?
No,
the day early?
I went a day late to go to Waiheke.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, the other one was why I missed the meetings with the state governing bodies. That was well documented. I was 8 k's away from meeting it, but the reality was that, again, you make decisions that are in the best interest of the club. I had the opposition leader and our federal member in here. At that time, only notified sort of 36 hours prior to that. And given the importance of that meeting, I made a decision that was more important, and I allocated another person in this organisation to attend the meeting via Zoom. All the detail was, then sent through to me. And so I think at times like that, when you're making those decisions, you make it in the best interest, and sometimes facts are lost on stories.
It was a wonderful gesture, the New Zealand trip. Another nice gesture was Brooksy's, well, we hoped it would be his final game and he'd be playing at CommBank Stadium, right? So
final home game.
And a little bit left field, a little bit different. I've got to say, it was a little bit odd seeing a barbecue in the centre of CommBank Stadium. It hasn't been done before. But the rationale behind that, and they're trying to criticise us about that decision as well. The simple fact of the matter is he's a very keen barbecue chef, which he revealed on our podcast.
Yeah, and I haven't read the criticism, but the reality is behind that, on the podcast, which, you host extremely well.
Thank you.
He declared his interest in cooking. He's obviously moved into a house not that long ago. We have given Luke over his tenure here a lot of balls, a lot of jerseys, a lot of framed jerseys. And there's, with the Kelly Barnes coming up and, with players exiting, there's more to come. But we thought something that would be a little bit different. And after checking with the NRL and the salary cap to see that there was no
$900.
Yeah. That we went ahead and thought that would be a unique and relevant and practical thing and I know Luke's pretty chuffed with it.
No, absolutely. I mean, what do you give a guy that's got the lot, like Father's Day gifts and all that sort of thing? I thought it was left field and good.
Oh, no, there's still more I want for Father's Day.
Yeah.
That I haven't received from my kids.
Let's talk about Benji's appointment. There are some saying, this grand 5-year plan is in tatters. They fast-tracked it. They're panic stations. That's not quite the case, is it? Because as I understand it, Benji coming in a year earlier was always an option.
Oh yeah, it was always contemplated when we came up with the 5-year plan, which we never named it a 5-year plan. It was obviously just 2 years and 3 years, which is 5, but we never named it the 5-year plan. It's a term that's been touted in the media. But no, Benji, we contemplated it. You've heard Tim publicly say how ready Benji is. Benji certainly is a generational player, but he's also, I think, got a unbelievable ability to connect with players. He's got the respect of the players. As long as this club makes sure that we put the right resources around Benji across many facets of the business, but make sure that we put the right resources around Benji so he is successful, we've got all confidence in him.
Scotty, with you, and we talked about before, for many, many years, Manly Sea Eagles blood has sort of been coursing through your veins, and there's a grandstand named after your late dad. You'll always be very strongly attached to the club, but now you're one of us.
Yeah, look, I'll be attached to Manly as much as I can be, but like my son still plays there. But like I'm West Tigers through and through now. Like the ties for Manly got cut as soon as I spoke to JP and we did the deal. So yeah, Manly is more or less, that was past. Dad's got a grandstand name there and all that, which is, as a family we're very chuffed for that to happen for their greatest player, and that'll always be there. But now it's purely West Tigers, and obviously from my background being carted around football grounds watching Dad's play and all that years ago, I understand Dad's got very many good friends too at both clubs. Like Roy Masters was one of Dad's good friends at West, and I remember going to Lidcombe Oval, like when we were at the East days, like years ago when I was real young, and those days, with Les and pretty good friends with Les Boyd, and like Tommy when he was alive, he was good friends with Dad, and you remember watching Big Dallas run out and Bruce Gibbs and all those fellas, Tommy Arbour, and remember all the fights and all that used to go on, which was probably good actually. But and then on from the Balmain side of things, Dad was obviously very good with Blocker and Ciro, Benny. And Gary Jack is from the same club down in Wollongong, same as Blocker, West Wollongong, where Dad played. Yeah. So there's a lot of sort of ties there, and I've had a lot to do with a lot of people from both clubs. So I understand the history coming into it, having been in the game for so long and in and around, the two clubs.
Our backgrounds are a little bit similar, being dragged around from club to club, watching footy games as kids.
100%.
Tell us, JP and Scotty, what are realistic expectations, do you think, for our football team for next season?
Oh, look, we always go into every single season with the expectation that we're going to be playing finals football. Anything else under that is, not what we've set out to do. That doesn't change, albeit, again, it comes back to sort of the next 6 to 8 weeks and the building blocks that we put around Benji to make sure that he's got all the support. And I do think the gentleman to your left is going to be instrumental in what and how we achieve it and the speed we achieve it, because recruitment is key.
The roster then for next season, how many pieces left to put into that puzzle?
Oh, there's a few, yeah, but I'm not going to tell you.
No.
Or anyone.
Okay, that's good. I'll be first to
It's
know.
important to note too that we're working with a roster now that has a lot of really strong, talented, great characters in there. So it's just making sure that we identify where the coaches believe their gaps, and then, as I said, the gentleman to your left is tasked to go out and make sure that we execute with speed.
Look, just on that, we have got a few targets in mind and all that, but we will, keep them close to our chest, and we've got a few other players to sort of move on potentially. And when people come in, when sort of a new regime come in, there always is roster change.
Yeah.
So hence, look, I think we're getting there pretty quickly.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of players on the market, so you've got to be strategic, or sort of work around what you can control. But I think we're going pretty well because, as JP said earlier, we identified the halves where everyone said we were lacking. Now we've got halves, so we'll just go into the other areas that we feel as though it'll benefit the club.
Yeah, and it must be said also there are still a handful of players who are off contract. Discussions are ongoing as well, and we won't know until our final Kelly Barnes night where we do farewell those players that are leaving us.
Yeah, and recruitment discussions happen every single day. Not necessarily in the format of the LMSC, but certainly between Scott talking to Benji, Scott talking to Danny Stapleton. Those discussions happen not just every day, but 2-3 times a day. In fact, Scott can become quite annoying with his amount of times that he rings. But again, I will say that one of the keys moving forward will be this gentleman here and his ability to act with speed around making sure that we get the right player.
All right. Well, I've addressed a few issues. We've addressed a few issues surrounding the club there. This program is really about you guys asking your questions of JP, also of Scotty as well. Mitch Flanagan has sent this question through, and we've already probably touched on it. Why a barbecue for Brooksy? Well, we thought it was a good idea, basically. Correct. Thank you. By the way, his favourite cut of meat
is?
Can we guess? Oh no, because
I'll ask you. Okay, it's rump cap, slow cooked on the Weber.
Oh,
you ever done it?
Okay. No,
No.
I haven't done that one.
Ron Hartland sends this question through regarding the Wests and Balmain merger. This is probably more directed at you, JP. Do you see it continuing? And if so, do you think the division can be healed?
Firstly, do I see it continuing? Well, the merger is West Tigers, so yes, it will continue forever. And in regards to division, I've sat in 8 years of board meetings and I've never seen the division play out in the board at all. So in any decision making, we obviously always, when making decisions or acting operationally, we pay homage and respect to our past, but we're also creating a future with West Tigers.
Can I jump in there too? I've been asked that question a million times and I've never seen 1 ounce of animosity. And I think it's like it flows like you wouldn't believe. I just don't understand where that narrative's coming from.
Look, you're always going to see fans in the stand with the old Masterton Magpies jersey on. You're going to see fans in the stand with the Balmain jersey on as well. That they just want to remain, loyal to their backgrounds, but they've moved with us. And then you'll see the majority with the West Tigers strip on. This one, I don't know if I should ask this one. Have you seen this one? Where is it? Hi, Justin. This is from Ross Catanzariti. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Hi, Justin. Did you seriously make a fan remove the Pascoe fiasco sign from our last home game at Combank Stadium?
Ross, thank you for your question. I didn't even know the sign was there. So not dissimilar to the media. I don't pay too much attention to it. I was watching the game. I didn't notice the sign.
I didn't see the sign.
Only until after when one of our staff member came up and said something to me, and then a journalist rang to say, did I remove it? And I said, what sign? So I didn't see it there. It was removed without my direction.
Okay, yeah. Next one from Sam RLC. It says here, what is the thinking on having the team have some cohesion? On the weekend, it looked like Dane and Tristan, so that's Dane Laurie and Tristan Riley, who made his NRL debut. They had a good combination. What combos do you think will work well going forward? Also, what is the one thing you think can mask out all the noise? Halves combinations.
Yeah, I think so. Like once Benj gets the boys in, Latu and Bud and Aiden, it's sort of going to be a new start depending on who else comes in and who goes. So I mean, we'll just have to wait till next year. But I'm sure Benji and the coaching staff will get what the roster that we have got. They'll get them absolutely firing. Tristan didn't play too bad. Dane's playing very well, but Dane's moving on now. Back to Penrith, so I think judge us on next year.
Yeah,
I don't think the challenge though this year, and you see the good clubs have cohesion in the halves or in the spine in particular.
Injuries are sort of
I think this year between and not an excuse but a reality between Adam going down, and then Appy going down, then Luke being injured. I don't think there's been any cohesion at all. And
I'd like to see if we put the same spine out 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, I would say that what Tim talks about a lot at the start of the year was about you can lose but don't get beat. When you look at, I think we've had now out of the 22 games that we've played, I think we've had 10 or 11 games decided by less than 6 points. So when you're looking at sort of the year before that, where there was ups and downs all the way through, probably our best performance and our worst performance, if you remove our best performance being the Cowboys and our worst performance being the Cowboys, the delta hasn't been that wide, and we've been thereabouts for a long time. So I think with cohesion, with the youth coming through, and with Benji and the support around him, I think, as Scott said, judge us on next year.
Second part of that question from Sam is, what is the one thing you think can mask out all the noise?
And winning games.
Winning games, right? Winning games. That's what you're here for.
100%. Yeah, that's what
you're here to run the business, but a big part of that is winning games.
Absolutely, winning games. Winning games, and I don't like to say mask, but winning games, I think is as I said before, it's what we're here to do. It's what our fans are expecting us to do, and that's what we have to do. And as I said before, you take that criticism front on. Again, the board, myself, everyone here is working really hard. We're not making decisions purposely to negatively affect the club. We take accountability when decisions don't go our way, and we try to rectify them and course correct the club to be in a position where we can be playing finals football. And also delivering the outcomes that we do and seriously do to our communities, which is really important.
Over the years, there have been other players, and it's a salary cap thing, that go to other clubs. All right, you could rattle them off some very good players that have gone. We won't go back on around all the different contract scenarios, but this one from Jack Boyle: will Buller and Junior be given long-term contracts to lock them in, or are we going to keep letting talent slip through our fingers?
Again, and I think Scotty said before that every single day we're having conversations with the right people about the right players, until there's signatures that we see. We'll let everyone know, but rest assured that we're having the right conversations with the right people.
This one from Mick. Thank you, Mick. As a club, do you think we need to revise our current home venue strategy?
Great question,
Mick.
We've made a decision to revert back to our suburban grounds, our traditional grounds. It's in our heartland. The reason being so we can really recapture our identity as West Tigers. The big challenge we have, and it is a significant challenge, is that, and we're pushing government regularly to try and get funding for stadia upgrades on both of those grounds. Hence why 3 weeks ago, instead of going to the state meeting, I decided to sit with the opposition leader and our federal member for that purpose, because these grounds are a part of who we are, but we need to get funding in for these grounds to be modernised and relevant to what the consumer needs. If you look at other clubs, some clubs have 2,400 corporate seats. We have approximately 400 in both grounds. What that does financially, the delta is enormous. And again, you talk about trying to invest back into the football program all the way through from Pathways Women to make it as successful as possible. That's a huge freaking hit for us. But we're willing to take that hit on, and we'll manage the business according to that. But it will be a big financial hit, but we will go back, we will create content at these stadiums, and we will try and make sure that the government sees how important it is that these stadiums need the support of the government.
One of those spiritual homes obviously is Leichhardt Oval, and Scotty, you've been through the process at Brookvale in recent years with its upgrade and now some of the corporate facilities it has, and your dad's grandstand as well. How has that redevelopment, I guess, invigorated the community on the beaches?
I noticed that like early in the year before I come across, when the new grandstand, the crowds at Manly have just been astonishing, really. You know, with that and the benefit. You know, with, as JP was saying, it's all about that corporate dollar, you know, in terms of having that. But it's also the new facility there. It's sort of, everyone was talking about it and everyone wanted to go and sit in it and, you know, everything else. So I think, like, if the same thing was to happen at Leichhardt, I think you'd pack it out of the crowds at Manly are getting, and they're not winning, but they're getting big crowds, you know. So, I mean, I think we could definitely do, I know Blocker beats on about it all the time. I think, you know, with the Leichhardt and also the out at Campbelltown, I think if, you know, JP's got a vision in mind, and if he gets that through, they'll be sort of, well, one will be a boutique stadium and one will be, you know, like just quite, because there is a centre of excellence going.
Yeah, that's the plan, having Academy out there. And it's not just about the corporate dollar. I should emphasise that. It's about providing, because Leichhardt, for instance,
adequate facilities
for everyone. So it's the GA ticket that needs to have great facilities. It's maintaining the ability for amenities to be able to service bigger crowds, because at the moment on both fronts it doesn't have that.
Where are we at then? Because I've seen a master plan from council with the redevelopment of Leichhardt. It looks...
Well, the big thing now is, Chris, is that
looks
you know, we invested in this business 6 years ago to go down a path of promoting, developing pathways and funding women in rugby league, right? We now sit there and say at Leichhardt, for instance, we can't hold our NRLW before our men's or after our men's because we don't have the facilities.
No female change rooms.
No female change rooms. So in today's world, where you're talking about equality and amenities and trying to promote on the back of the recent World Cup, that's extraordinary. Like, that's extraordinary. So what we're trying to do is sit there and say, and you saw the Prime Minister come out in the paper on the weekend and say he's going to allocate, I think, $200 million. Well, I would say that the first place you should be allocating that is to professional women's sport, and we should be on the top of the list.
Yeah. Benjamin Angus sends this question through. What's going to change in terms of on-field direction? 8 wins in 2 years, no finals footy in 12 years, and consecutive wooden spoons. Why should the paying member maintain a financial investment?
Yeah, like we spoke before, I think you've got now a new coaching structure. You're going to have the right support. You've got a really talented and exciting roster which will continue to evolve. You've got a fantastic women's program that are doing us really proud. You've got the club going back to its roots in its geographical areas. You've got the club continually investing in the communities and making a really powerful difference out there in the marketplace and for our communities. And so I think we're in a position where I think the only way is up, and it's exciting moving forward. It's hard to see, I get it, and everyone's frustrated, but the members and the fans are what embody this club. And without our members and fans staying together, like I said before about us internally being united and stopping the noise, how more powerful is it that our fans and members stay together and keep on having the faith in the club and the passion for the club that they've had for so many years to make sure we come through the other end and become the powerhouse that we all want it to be.
Well said. Well, that's just about it for this edition of Ask the Boss. Thanks very much to our members and fans for sending those questions through. Be sure to do it for next month's edition as well. Scotty, great to have you on board, mate, and thanks for joining us.
No, I appreciate it.
And Justin, as always, a new format of Ask the Boss. Great to have you in as well. Thank you for
volunteering to change the format and be a part of it, and hopefully the wider audience actually vote accordingly and want you back.
Great stuff. Thank you, JP. And don't forget, if you also want to keep more of this content, we've always got the weekly podcast as well, Behind the Raw. And as I say, on that, you know what to do. We'll see you next month, same time, same place. Until then, show your stripes.